Call the cops, he's trespassing. That's what she screamed the second I stepped inside my own cabin. My stomach sank. After a year and a half of staying away because of grief, I came home, only to find a total stranger acting like she owned my father's place. She was shouting at me like I was the criminal, while I still had the keys in my hand. My brain spun. What on earth was happening? Comment where you're watching from, because this HOA Karen is about to realize she picked the absolute worst person to challenge. Story setup. When I finally returned to my dad's cabin after 18 long months, I didn't find peace. Instead, I found 20 wealthy women sitting cross-legged on yoga mats using my father's fishing gear as spiritual relics. Leading them was Nicole Wright, a woman I had never seen before in my life, charging each guest $2,000 to commune with the spirit of the fisherman. When she spotted me, she shrieked, "Security! Remove this negative male presence." I froze. Security? In the house I'd inherited? Sure enough, earpieces, clipboards, and even a printed guest list appeared. Nicole pointed at me like I was an intruder and hissed into her radio, "Target has arrived early. Containment protocol in effect. Wrong fisherman, son." That's when I realized this wasn't just a scam, it was an operation. Jake's voice carried that sharp edge he gets whenever corruption is in the air. When he pressed Commissioner Williams about the law supposedly giving Nicole control over private property, the man grew twitchy, circling around community wellness initiatives, but dodging every direct question. Something was rotten inside our local government. Jake's digging uncovered that Williams was buried under $50,000 in gambling debt owed to some very dangerous people. But here's where things snapped into focus. Williams had been making steady payments. The mystery was where a county commissioner with a modest salary got that kind of money. That's when it hit us. Nicole wasn't just exploiting his weakness, she was his lifeline. She discovered his gambling addiction, arranged for his debts to be managed, and now had him in her pocket. Williams feared his loan sharks more than the law. But what he didn't expect was that a federal investigation was closing in. My own background check blew the lid wide open. Nicole Wright wasn't some eccentric wellness guru. She was Dr. Rebecca Santos, a disgraced therapist stripped of her license for preying on grieving clients. After her scandal, she vanished into the mountains, rebuilding herself as a spiritual guide. Her training in grief psychology made her an expert at hitting the emotional pressure points of families like mine, twisting their pain into leverage. But the bombshell was even darker. Jake's search revealed Crystal Moon wasn't a recovering addict at all. She was Jennifer Santos, Nicole's sister, with a rap sheet for fraud and identity theft. She'd been planted here 6 months ago, pretending to need help, while secretly gathering intelligence on me, my depression, my divorce, every personal detail that could be used as ammunition. This wasn't random. Nicole's network had surveillance on my private life, my embarrassing divorce, accusations, financial fights, even therapy records. She knew exactly which insecurities and fears could be turned into psychological weapons. Jake discovered Nicole had been running parallel scams in 3 other states, targeting families with inherited properties worth nearly $8 million. She'd perfected a cold-blooded system, scan obituaries for grieving heirs, invent fake spiritual legacies, and swoop in with forged community healing rights to seize valuable land. It wasn't just fraud, it was a scalable business model built on grief exploitation. I realized if she could infiltrate, so could I. I built a fake seeker identity, David Miller, and hacked into her booking system to infiltrate her empire from the inside. The evidence was damning. Fake reviews, manufactured testimonials, shell accounts, and forged permits that made her operation look airtight to outsiders. Meanwhile, Crystal's cover as a recovering addict gave her the perfect excuse to spy, asking innocent-sounding questions while reporting my every move through encrypted channels. She wasn't some vulnerable woman in need, she was a trained intelligence gatherer. Nicole was already moving on her next big play, Brooke Sterling's $25,000 celebrity transformation weekend. She'd brought in professional film crews, catered events, and was about to turn my father's memory into viral social media content. National exposure would crown her as a legitimate spiritual authority. But Nicole had been busy covering her tracks too. Tom Bradley quietly told me she'd been filing false police reports for months, painting me as unstable, grief-stricken, and dangerous. She was constructing a legal paper trail to lock me out of my own inheritance before I could stop her. What Jake uncovered next chilled me to my core. Nicole wasn't just a lone operator. She was part of a multi-state criminal enterprise with training manuals, shared playbooks, and coordinated methods for targeting mourning families. Entire communities were being deceived by the same tactics. For Jake, this wasn't just a case anymore. His own mother had lost their family farm in Oregon to a scam almost identical to Nicole's. Helping me wasn't just legal work, it was personal vengeance. He was determined to dismantle her network piece by piece. Nicole's upcoming celebrity retreat was more than a cash grab. It was her masterstroke. Use viral entertainment content to cement her credibility, gain mainstream legitimacy, and shield her scam with the armor of social proof. Once Brooke's followers saw the performance, Nicole wouldn't just be a fraud. She'd be untouchable. Nicole's psychological profile of me showed just how far ahead she was playing this game. She dug into everything: my divorce records, money problems, even therapy notes, mapping out every weak spot she could weaponize. Shame, grief, credibility. She had a plan to attack each one if I didn't cave. But Crystal? She was more than just a spy hanging around town. She was running a full-scale intel op, tracking neighbors, digging up blackmail material, studying community loyalties, and reporting on my moods in real time. And the worst part? She was shaping public opinion, playing the role of a fragile victim while quietly turning people against me. By the time Brooke's celebrity weekend was about to start, Nicole wasn't worried in the slightest. She had spent over a year building the legal, social, and psychological scaffolding to steal my inheritance under the mask of spiritual authority. Every move I could make, she already had a counter. It was like battling a general who had already fought and won this war dozens of times before. Then I overheard Nicole make a call that chilled me. The target is becoming problematic. Initiate legal containment. Restraining order filed tomorrow morning. Wait, tomorrow morning? That meant it was already in motion. At 7 a.m., Jake called me in a panic. Owen, we've got a problem. Nicole filed for a restraining order yesterday. The hearing is in 2 hours. She's accusing you of stalking her guests and threatening spiritual practitioners. How is that even possible? How can a property owner be banned from his own land? But Nicole had done it, and she came prepared. That hearing? It was like watching a courtroom performance fit for Hollywood. Nicole walked in looking like the ultimate trauma survivor, every gesture calculated, every nervous tick rehearsed. She had a mountain of evidence, staged photos of me lurking near the cabin, coached testimonies from neighbors, and what looked like airtight police reports. Her background as a therapist let her spin a narrative where I was a grief-crazed man unraveling into violence. Judge Harrison didn't stand a chance. He was used to traffic tickets and fence disputes, not being buried under therapeutic jargon and a binder thicker than a dictionary. Nicole's credentials, her concerned professional act, it all convinced him. Every point I made, she had 3 counters waiting. My property rights? She reframed them as spiritual community resources. My grief? She claimed it made me a danger to others. Nicole had built an evidence trap so perfect that the judge granted her request. Just like that, I was banned from setting foot within 500 feet of my own family's cabin. The system had been flipped against me, my reputation shredded, my rights stripped, all through psychological warfare, but giving up wasn't an option. Jake pulled strings and got me a lifeline, press credentials from his contact in the film permit office. It meant I could slip into Nicole's production under the guise of working with Brooks' crew. Risky? Absolutely. If I got caught violating the order, I'd be in jail. But it was my only shot to catch Nicole in the act. Nicole had gone all in on this event. My father's cabin was unrecognizable, transformed into a luxury retreat with camera crews, lighting rigs, catering, the works. She was staging something called a sacred fisherman ancestor channeling ceremony, charging $25,000 a head, claiming to speak wisdom from my dead father while filming it for viral content. It was sickening. She was monetizing my father's memory, my family's grief, right in front of me. But then, during a filming break, I got what I needed. Nicole bragged to a cameraman about her entire scam. The trick is targeting families too grief-stricken to fight back. Dead relatives never complain about how you interpret their legacy, and the living are too broken to resist. You just have to get in before they recover. She admitted everything. And then came the twist no one saw coming. Brooks Sterling wasn't some clueless influencer being duped. The moment I explained Nicole's fraud, Brooks' business brain kicked in. Exposing a fake healer on live stream? That was way more viral than promoting spiritual transformation. So Brooke flipped the script. She went live to her 50,000 followers and called Nicole out in real time. Guys, I've just discovered I'm being scammed by a fake spiritual leader who's exploiting a dead man's legacy. Nicole's empire started to collapse instantly. The chat exploded with outrage, users digging into her past, and a crowdsourced investigation snowballing across platforms. For the first time, Nicole wasn't in control. Her scam was unraveling in public live, and when she tried to save herself by calling for my arrest mid-broadcast, the optics backfired spectacularly. A so-called healer, exploiting grief, demanding cops arrest the grieving son? The audience saw right through her. And then, in the chaos, Tom Bradley spotted something that blew the lid off Nicole's inner circle. Crystal's supposed victim, undercover spy, was caught using professional surveillance equipment. Amid the chaos, Tom spotted something that changed everything. Crystal's cover was blown. Her encrypted radio, the surveillance gear, none of it belonged to a recovering addict. It was clear she was a trained operative, not a victim. Months of carefully built trust shattered in an instant, and that's when the dominoes really started to fall. Brooks' viral livestream spread like wildfire, and within hours state agencies were flooded with complaints. Suddenly, Nicole's so-called retreat was under official scrutiny. The response was lightning fast, almost too fast. It felt like investigators had already been circling, just waiting for a public excuse to move in. Jake got the call. Mr. Morrison, your client's property is flagged for unlicensed commercial use. We're opening a full investigation. The internet had turned into an unlikely weapon of justice, and Nicole had no idea the storm it unleashed. Investigators tore through her operation with precision usually reserved for corporate fraud. Business violations, tax evasion, fake licensing, it was all on the table. Then came the biggest crack in Nicole's empire. Her own sister turned on her. Facing federal charges, Jennifer Santos aka Crystal chose survival over loyalty. She laid everything out, how Nicole scouted victims through obituaries, trained recruits in grief psychology, and used manipulation playbooks to pressure families into giving up property. Her testimony was a roadmap straight into the heart of the enterprise. Nicole's response was pure psychological warfare. She threatened to release my most personal demons details from my divorce, therapy, finances, every embarrassment she could weaponize to destroy me publicly. But I wasn't about to let her control the story, so I flipped the script. Using my cybersecurity background, I dropped a digital dossier exposing Nicole's criminal past, testimony from victims, financial records tracing her theft, proof of her misconduct as a therapist. Piece by piece, I burned down the image she had built. Even Commissioner Williams, the man she had owned through gambling debts, switched sides. Realizing his re-election was at stake, he traded evidence for immunity. He admitted Nicole had used his debts to buy his compliance, and now he was ready to bring her down. As investigators pieced together the puzzle, a horrifying pattern emerged. Nicole wasn't just operating in our county. She had cloned her scam in at least 5 states, siphoning millions while destroying families already crushed by grief. That triggered federal jurisdiction. Suddenly, her local allies were powerless. Her polished public mask cracked under pressure. The once calm healer melted down in front of cameras, her manipulation stripped bare. And for the first time, the community saw the predator behind the performance. But Nicole wasn't done. She escalated. When legal tricks failed, she turned to violence, hiring muscle to intimidate me into silence. It was no longer just about property. It was survival. Thankfully, Tom's law enforcement network stepped in. They put real security around me, trained professionals who could see the difference between legal maneuvering and outright criminal threats. Nicole's last card had been played, and it failed. Meanwhile, Brooke's documentary series was gaining national traction. Journalists, advocacy groups, even lawmakers were taking notice. Nicole wasn't just another fraudster anymore. She had become the face of a national scandal, and when federal courts seized her assets, it was poetic justice. The crystal she once sold for hundreds, the fake certifications, the expensive props of her empire, all boxed up and auctioned for pennies. The empire she built on grief was collapsing into rubble. Even then, Nicole clung to her victim act. She blamed me for destroying her healing community, painted Crystal's betrayal as my fault, and tried to guilt the very people she had manipulated. But this time, no one was buying it. Then came the revelation that chilled investigators. Nicole's playbook wasn't unique. Training manuals, networks of associates, and digital materials revealed that her techniques were spreading, copied, and weaponized by scammers across the country. Military families, widows, anyone vulnerable to grief was a target. Nicole hadn't just been our Crystal's cooperation went far beyond a simple confession. She revealed exactly how Nicole's machine operated, how recruits were groomed, how vulnerable families were profiled, and how strict security protocols kept law enforcement at bay. Her testimony didn't just expose Nicole as a fraud. It unmasked an entire underground industry built on exploiting grief and seizing inherited property across state lines. The fallout changed everything. New safeguards were put in place. Spiritual leaders now had to verify credentials. Retreat operators faced background checks, and families were educated on recognizing the warning signs of emotional exploitation. Even local officers received training on the sophisticated psychological tricks criminals used to prey on the newly bereaved. What Nicole built had forced the system to adapt, ensuring no other community would fall so easily for spiritual imposters. But Nicole wasn't finished. Her last card was a nuclear option. She threatened to release private dirt on anyone who dared stand against her. She referenced files of surveillance notes, blackmail material, and secrets she claimed could destroy lives. Then came her chilling command: burn everything. If I go down, Owen's secrets go first. Execute final protocol. And she followed through. Nicole dumped everything she'd gathered on me, my divorce documents, therapy notes, financial failures, humiliations I'd buried for years. It was a psychological ambush meant to isolate me, to shame me out of the fight before prosecutors delivered their final blow. She was betting that embarrassment would succeed where intimidation had failed. But she underestimated one thing: the people. Brooke's audience had grown into a movement. Instead of condemning me, thousands flooded in with their own stories: families betrayed, corruption covered up, scammers who weaponized personal pain. What Nicole thought would destroy me actually united an entire community against her. Her shame campaign backfired spectacularly. That's when she escalated again. 2 of her men tried to corner me outside Jake's law office, ready to send a brutal warning. The setting was perfect for them. Dark lot, few witnesses. But Tom Bradley's foresight paid off. Retired police contacts intervened, stopping the assault cold. Security footage captured the entire attempt, turning Nicole's intimidation into more federal charges and proving her crimes weren't just financial anymore. They were violent. Crystal's full cooperation sealed Nicole's fate. She handed over records, communications, training manuals, even financial trails. For the first time, prosecutors had a complete blueprint of the entire operation: how victims were chosen, how accomplices were trained, how defiant property owners were silenced. The evidence connected Nicole's scam across multiple states and implicated dozens of her collaborators. The sentencing came swiftly. Nicole received 8 years in federal prison and was ordered to pay $300,000 in restitution. The punishment reflected not just her crimes, but her leadership in building a systematic machine that profited from pain. Crystal, by contrast, received probation and was tasked with assisting victims, her cooperation marking the line between criminal mastermind and reluctant participant. Nicole's political shield collapsed too. Commissioner Williams resigned in disgrace, his career destroyed by the corruption charges tied to her schemes. His replacement introduced transparency laws and oversight systems designed to ensure criminals could never again buy political protection. Williams became a grim lesson in how corruption enables predators to thrive. Then came the dismantling of Nicole's empire. Federal auctions sold off her fake healing props, the overpriced crystals, phony certifications, and theatrical artifacts. What once cost victims hundreds now sold for a few dollars, barely covering administrative fees. The fall from luxury to bargain bin junk was a perfect symbol of her fraud exposed. At last, I reclaimed my father's cabin. Every trace of Nicole's exploitation was stripped away, replaced with the quiet dignity my father left behind. Putting his fishing gear back where it belonged felt like restoring not just a cabin, but a part of myself stolen by grief and greed. The community, too, needed closure. Tom Bradley arranged a single gathering where neighbors could acknowledge their mistakes, apologize for being deceived, and pledge support for protecting families and property rights. It wasn't about revenge, it was about healing, about moving forward stronger and wiser than before. Unning a scam. She had built a blueprint for an entire criminal industry. The gathering marked more than closure. It rebuilt bonds Nicole had tried so hard to fracture. Her manipulation of community trust had left scars, but the event helped people reconnect through genuine remembrance instead of staged ceremonies. One of the most unexpected outcomes came from Brooke. What began as her influencer career shifted into something entirely new: investigative journalism focused on consumer protection. The woman who once promoted staged healing retreats now used her viral platform to educate the public about scams, exploitation, and grief manipulation. Her credibility turned out to be one of Nicole's greatest miscalculations. My father's Memorial became the clearest contrast imaginable: authentic stories, honest emotions, and not a single dollar exchanged. It was simple, heartfelt, and everything Nicole's commercialized pageants could never be. No ticket sales, no props, no exploitation. Just truth. Just family. Exactly the way Dad would have wanted his life remembered. Even in prison, Nicole couldn't help herself. Reports surfaced of her filing fake grievances, declaring herself a spiritual leader among inmates, and spinning elaborate victim narratives to manipulate staff. She was addicted to power through exploitation, and confinement proved the only safeguard against her relentless predation. She didn't change, she simply found a smaller stage. But my own frustration at how easily she built her empire led to something new. I developed a verification app designed to prevent fraud before it started. Families could instantly check a practitioner's credentials, confirm property ownership for advertised venues, and cross-reference databases of known scammers. What once slipped through unnoticed could now be flagged in seconds. The system spread quickly, protecting families across the region and saving an estimated $2 million annually from would-be fraudsters. Just as I started to feel like the nightmare was truly over, the phone rang. An Oregon detective delivered the news I never wanted to hear. Mr. Hayes, Nicole wasn't the top. She was middle management. Do you want to know who's really running this operation? The revelation was chilling. Nicole had been a cog in a far larger machine. Her training, manuals, and techniques weren't dying with her. They were spreading. Released accomplices and copycats were already targeting military widows, elderly families, and anyone inheriting property during moments of vulnerability. What I thought was an isolated scheme was actually an industry. My shift from survivor to federal consultant happened almost overnight. Prosecutors recognized that my rare mix of cybersecurity expertise and first-hand knowledge of grief exploitation gave me an edge traditional investigators lacked. They needed someone who could trace the digital fingerprints, decode the psychological methods, and anticipate the moves of criminals operating in an entirely new market of fraud. Crystal's transformation became another twist no one expected. Jennifer Santos, the woman once embedded in Nicole's con, emerged as an advocate for victims. Using her inside knowledge of how targets were profiled, groomed, and manipulated, she built a practice dedicated to helping survivors recover. The same skills she once used to destroy lives were now being used to rebuild them. It didn't erase her past, but it proved redemption was possible. What began as a personal battle over my father's cabin evolved into something much larger. Nicole's fall exposed an industry. My app grew into a shield for families across the region. Crystal turned her knowledge into a lifeline for survivors. And federal agencies now had insight into a crime wave they'd barely recognized before. But Detective Carter's words still echo. Nicole wasn't the leader. Which means this store, the app I built, gave families something Nicole never expected: power. In seconds, they could verify a so-called practitioner's credentials, cross-check property ownership with advertised retreat venues, and pull from a live database of known fraudsters. What used to slip through unnoticed was now being blocked. Before manipulation could even begin, early results were staggering: hundreds of scams shut down every month, and law enforcement finally had the intelligence needed to map out criminal networks. Brooks' viral series had also evolved. What began as raw exposure turned into a national education tool. Police departments, social service agencies, and community groups were now using her work to train families in fraud recognition. She had turned storytelling into prevention, and copycat operations were being stopped before they even had a chance to grow. Meanwhile, Tom Bradley's training program was becoming standard practice for rural police academies. His lessons on Evidence collection, psychological manipulation tactics, and victim protection weren't just theoretical. They were being taught to officers who would likely encounter spiritual fraud for the very first time. That meant future families wouldn't be caught off guard like we were. Out of everything we endured, something remarkable was born: sacred memory protection. What started as one family's fight had grown into a regional organization. We were helping families across multiple states recognize fraud attempts, document exploitation, and connect with legal and emotional resources. The results spoke for themselves: over $2 million a year saved from scammers who thought grief made people easy prey. Even Nicole herself, from her prison cell, had become an unwilling resource. Her obsessive record-keeping, recruitment methods, training guides, even communication systems was now being used by federal agencies to dismantle other operations. The irony was brutal. The same tactics she once used to destroy families were now protecting them. Legislative change soon followed. States began requiring proof of spiritual authority claims, mandatory licenses for retreat operators, and stricter protections for property rights during family crises. The law was no longer reactive, it was proactive, building barriers to stop exploitation before it ever began. Partnerships expanded the reach even further. Funeral homes, grief counselors, and legal aid societies integrated the verification systems into their services. Families now had multiple checkpoints, layers of protection that scammers couldn't bypass. Fraud prevention had become a coordinated, community-wide defense, and from the pain of loss, a new tradition emerged. Our annual memorial event honored those exploited by fraud while teaching others how to protect themselves. What once symbolized pain and manipulation now represented resilience, education, and collective healing. Nicole's role as a federal informant continued to feed valuable intelligence. From prison, she revealed how networks adapted, where they recruited, and which tactics were evolving under pressure. The same woman who thrived on manipulation had unwillingly become one of the most important tools in dismantling the very industry she helped create. The regional prevention model spread like wildfire. Our network began coordinating with other states, sharing real-time intelligence and standardized tools. The ripple effect meant that what started in one cabin now stretched across the country. When I finally sat in my father's cabin restored, peaceful, untouched by exploitation, it meant more than property recovery. It symbolized the return of authenticity, a space for memory and healing, free from the fake spiritual theater Nicole once staged for profit. And just when I thought the war was won, the phone rang. A quiet evening, a routine call, or so I thought. "Owen," the voice whispered. "It's me, Crystal. I think Nicole's boss just found my new address." In that instant, I realized our victory wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of something much larger, much darker, and far more dangerous. But this time, I wasn't the same unprepared victim who walked into that cabin 18 months earlier. Now I had the knowledge, the allies, and the network to fight back. And together, we understood something Nicole never did: grief doesn't make you weak. It makes you ready. That's how you handle a spiritual scammer who thinks they can turn mourning into profit. If this story of fighting back against HOA fraud gave you chills, smash that like button so more families can learn these protection strategies. From all of us here at Listen HOA Stories, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video, where justice always finds a way. Way isn't over.